Hello and welcome to the pragmatic approach to a feedback protocol for the use of outcome measures. The choice of 6 different outcome measures can be used for recording progress and treatment from beginning to end with the clients. And there's also contextual data forms, therapy assessment and end of therapy forms. These in fact can be printed off as a back-to-back one sheet document. Looking at this in more detail, site ID is the site that you're working at. Service provider is yourself. Date, the date of the assessment. Service user, the client, the patient, the service user. Age of the service user. Employment status, so this is whether full-time, part-time, unemployed, full-time student, etc. Gender. Refers, whoever has sent the person for treatment, be it their self or somebody else. Ethnic origin, to get a sense of the ethnicity of the people we're actually working with. Site-specific subcodes, this is where whichever of the 6 outcome measures you've chosen to use at the beginning of treatment, this is where you capture the total score. Not the individual questions now, just the total score. Referral date, the date the person was referred to you. Assessment date, the date you're doing the assessment. Carrying on down, it's very helpful to capture something about the relationship support of the particular person you're working with and their circumstances, whether they're on medication or not, and the type of medication, the group of medication, and then a brief note about the reason for referral. Keep it very brief so that there's less information to be transferred into CoreNet later. Just a little note. Now, with identified problems and concerns, it's very important to pick both severity and duration. Severity is scored from 1 to 4, 1 being mild, 2 being more moderate, 3 being moderately severe, and 4 being severe. And then the length of time from 6 months, less than 6 months, to 6 to 12 months, or recurring. So here's an example, scoring 3 for trauma, and it's been going on for more than 12 months. And finally, choosing the assessment outcome, whether the client's accepted for treatment or referred elsewhere, or just has 1 session only. When you come to the end of treatment, the final part will be filling in the end of therapy form. And this is again just capturing the date the treatment started, the date it finished, the numbers of sessions the client attended for, the number of sessions the client actually failed to attend for, not cancelled with notice, but failed to attend for. And then the final score from their last session that they attended for, albeit planned ending or unplanned ending. And this is why it's important to capture the type of ending, as you can see here. So preparation then will involve making sure you've got the right documentation available, deciding which measures you're going to actually use, deciding whether you're going to use them on a sessional basis, that's at every appointment session, or at the start and the end only of treatment. The recommendation being by using sessional instruments, first of all, it helps in the actual treatment itself to monitor progress. Secondly, it means that if the client fails to attend for a final session, you do have a final measure of the impact of that treatment on the client. So here's an example. Joan Doe decides to use a core 10 at beginning and end, and she will need a therapy assessment end of therapy form, 2-sided, 1 piece of paper, 2-sided. Joan will need 2 core 10 measures, 1 for start and 1 for the end. So here are the measures that she needs. The therapy assessment form stroke end of therapy form, 1 core 10 measure for the beginning and 1 core 10 for the end. The client fills in the measures at the start of treatment. Joan looks at the answers and scores the measures. She discusses any matters arising from the answers with the client, and Joan fills in the therapy assessment form and the total core 10 score. So let's look at that. Here are the marks that the client made on the outcome measure. Joan transfers these marks across into the scoring boxes on the right hand side. And note there's 1 box specially for that risk question, question 6, on the core 10R column on the very right there. And then Joan adds up these scores and puts them in the little boxes at the bottom. Now, this score, the total core 10 score, is the score that's going to be transferred onto that therapy assessment form. So here we are, all the other contextual information is filled in, and this is where that score is going to go into that box. Now you can see that there's 5 other boxes available for 5 other possible measures that you may choose to want to use, depending on what it is that you want to capture about that particular client. In this case, we're just using a core 10 at beginning of treatment. Now at the last session, Joan scores the measure in exactly the same way and enters the final score on the end of therapy form. So here we go again. This time the score has gone down to 7 following the 4 sessions of treatment that the client had. So this is the final outcome measure that was filled in by the client. Once again, on the end of therapy form, the relevant contextual data, day therapy commenced, completed, number of sessions, attended and unattended is all captured, as well, of course, as very importantly the type of ending, whether it was planned or unplanned. And then finally, the score that the client scored, the total score for the core 10 at that last appointment. So in summary, always fully fill in a therapy assessment and end of therapy form for every client, including cases that drop out of treatment. Important to go through one's notes regularly and close cases out if they've no longer come back for treatment. Best practice is to measure with at least one measure at every session the client attends for. In this way, if the client prematurely drops out, you'll always have a final measure. At the very minimum, use at least one measure at the start and one at the end of treatment. But it's only the total scores now that you need to capture, the first and the final sessions that are the scores on the forms ready for entry into CoreNet. Regardless of how many measures you use, the scoring process is exactly the same. If you choose to use all 6 measures, you simply enter the total scores from all of the 6 measures on the therapy assessment form at that first appointment, and you enter the total scores from those 6 measures on the end of therapy form at the last appointment the client attended for. So this is a very pragmatic approach. Now let's look at what you might be interested in trauma treatment. Well, core 10 is a good overall measure of distress. And score higher than 10 is in the clinical range. The impact of event scale is a good measure of the more typical trauma-specific symptoms, and it covers both avoidance and intrusion. Use the measures at the start and the end of treatment, and you may wish also to use a core 10 and an IES at each session to measure progress. But it is only the total scores from the core 10 and the impact of event scale that are transferred to the therapy assessment form and the end of therapy form. And you're now ready to enter your data into CoreNet. Thank you, and you can move on to the other presentation.